My name is Eliana Vance. I was 17 years old on the day my life, as I knew it, was overexposed and then faded to black. I lived in Bend, Oregon, a town of breathtaking natural beauty, nestled in the high desert and cradled by the snow-capped Cascade Mountains. It's a place where the scent of pine and juniper hangs in the clean, dry air, a town where craft breweries and high-end outdoor gear shops serve as the communal chapels. And where spirituality, if spoken of at all, was more likely to be found on a solitary, pre-dawn hike up Tumalo Mountain than within the four walls of a church. My parents, however, were prominent, respected members of one of the largest and most influential evangelical churches in the region. My father was a renowned orthopedic surgeon, a man of immense skill and precision, whose hands pieced together the broken bodies of skiers, mountain bikers, and rock climbers. My mother was a top-performing real estate agent, a woman of impeccable taste and relentless drive, selling a carefully curated vision of the perfect mountain lifestyle to wealthy clients from California and Seattle. Their lives were a flawless exhibition of success, a testament to the power of ambition, relentless hard work, and a brand of American Christianity that fit as comfortably as a tailored suit into a prosperous, conservative, Republican worldview. They had enrolled me in an exclusive private Christian school since kindergarten. Their reasoning was twofold, a pragmatic blend of spiritual and worldly ambition. They believed in the school's stated mission of providing a Christ-centered education, but they were equally, if not more, invested in its reputation for rigorous college preparatory academics and the invaluable social connections it provided with the children of the city's other successful professionals. I was, by all external measures, a product of their investment. I excelled. I maintained a 4.2 GPA. I learned the memory verses for Bible class with the same methodical precision I applied to memorizing my physics formulas. I could articulate the finer points of Calvinist doctrine versus Arminianism with enough intellectual firepower to win a debate. And I wore the knee-length plaid skirts and modest polo shirts of my school uniform with an air of sophisticated, detached compliance. But deep down in the quiet, unobserved darkroom of my soul, I was an agnostic in a uniform, a quiet skeptic surrounded by a sea of people who seemed utterly, unshakably convinced of their own righteousness. My soul felt like an undeveloped roll of high-speed black and white film. I sensed there was an image there, a potential for something real, something with substance and truth. But it was latent, undeveloped, hidden in a profound and often lonely darkness. My camera was my only real confidant, my only true sanctuary. Through its lens, I tried to make sense of the world. I saw the truth hiding behind the practiced smiles. I saw the subtle, almost imperceptible lines of exhaustion in my mother's eyes as she organized another flawless church charity gala. I saw the flicker of deep, existential worry in my dad's brow as he reviewed the church's financial statements late at night. And I saw the momentary flash of doubt in the eyes of my friends as we stood to recite creeds and sing songs. Our voices blending in a chorus of certainty that I felt was a performance. My photography was a search for authenticity in a world that felt increasingly staged. To be brutally honest, my thoughts were rarely occupied with matters of eternity. My mind was a busy intersection of tangible, pressing concerns. I was consumed with perfecting my college application essays, with leading my debate team to the state championship, and with the quiet, persistent, and often distracting hope of deciphering the enigmatic, fleeting smile of a boy named Liam, whose piercing blue eyes and quiet, non-performative intelligence captivated me from 2 rows ahead in my AP European history class. The grand, sweeping concepts of God, Jesus, heaven, and hell felt like abstract variables in a complex, ancient equation I had neither the time nor the inclination to solve. They were the vocabulary of my parents' world, the foundational stories they used to provide comfort, moral structure, and what seemed to me a divine endorsement for their prosperous way of life. But for me, the words felt hollow, like grand, booming echoes in an empty cathedral. They lacked the substance of reality, the grit and texture of the world I was trying to capture with my camera. This feeling of profound disconnect was exponentially amplified by the cultural and political climate that had come to dominate our church and school community in recent years. It was a slow, creeping change that had become an all-consuming obsession. The faith I saw practiced around me seemed, to my analytical and observant mind, to have less and less to do with the self-sacrificial, enemy-loving, grace-filled Jesus of the Gospels, and more to do with a fervent, almost desperate, and often angry political allegiance. The name I heard invoked with the most raw, untethered passion, the most unshakable, zealous fervor, both in reverent, almost messianic praise and in venomous, apocalyptic condemnation, wasn't Jesus. It was Trump. Donald Trump. His name was a constant, looming presence, a spiritual litmus test that divided friend from friend and sometimes family from family. The division he inspired was a palpable thing, a deep, seismic crack running through the very foundation of our church, our school, and the polite dinner parties my parents hosted. It was a messy, emotional, and to me, utterly illogical phenomenon. People I respected, intelligent people like my father, seemed to suspend all critical thinking when it came to this one man. It was one more powerful, compelling piece of evidence for my growing suspicion that this brand of faith was more about preserving a certain cultural identity and wielding political power than it was about any kind of transcendent, loving, or universal truth. It was a Friday night in late autumn, the air sharp and bitingly cold, carrying the scent of pine needles and the metallic, clean promise of the first winter snow. I was driving home from a late-night study session at a friend's house, my mind a buzzing hive of calculus problems, historical dates, and potential rebuttals for the upcoming debate tournament. The highway was a dark, lonely ribbon of asphalt, cutting a solitary path through the vast, silent, ink-black pine forests of central Oregon. I remember the song playing softly on the radio, an ethereal, melancholic melody from an indie band called The National. I remember the hypnotic, rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers, working to clear a light, freezing mist that was beginning to coat the asphalt in a treacherous, almost invisible sheen of black ice. I was navigating a familiar, sweeping curve on Highway 97, a stretch of road I had driven hundreds, if not thousands, of times before. It was a moment of perfect, mundane, teenage normalcy. I remember glancing in my rearview mirror, a reflexive, thoughtless action, and seeing the blinding, aggressive, all-consuming glare of high beams. A massive semi-truck, its chrome grille a terrifying, rapidly approaching monster, was moving impossibly fast, far too fast for the slick, icy conditions, its driver likely asleep or distracted. There was the horrifying, drawn-out, ear-splitting screech of 16 tires fighting a losing battle against the laws of momentum and ice, a sound that seemed to tear the silent, peaceful night apart. I remember a violent, world-shattering, bone-jarring impact from behind that felt like the hand of a vengeful and indifferent god, a force so immense it seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. I remember the sickening, metallic sensation of my small, safe sedan twisting, folding, and crumpling around me like a discarded aluminum can. Then came an explosive, crystalline symphony of shattering glass, a flash of white-hot, electric, obliterating pain that seemed to cauterize thought, time, and self. And finally, a profound, deep, and absolute silence. Then nothing, everything went black. But it was not the end. I know now, with a certainty that is more real than the ground beneath my feet, that it was, in fact, the beginning. It was the moment my eyes were truly, finally, and irrevocably opened. The first thing I recall after the violent chaos of the impact was a stillness. A stillness so complete, so perfect that it was a sound in itself, the sound of all striving, all noise, all earthly pain ceasing to be. And then I could see again, but not with my physical eyes, which I somehow knew were closed forever in a mangled wreck on a dark, cold highway. I was seeing with something else, with a pure, untethered consciousness. I was floating, weightless and serene, near the ceiling of the twisted metal cage that had once been my car. I was an observer, a detached, dispassionate witness to a scene of profound earthly horror. I saw my own body, a broken doll slumped over the steering wheel, unnaturally still and pale beneath the chaotic, strobing lights of the emergency vehicles that had already begun to arrive with incredible speed. I saw the flashing lights painting the dark, silent, ancient trees in frantic, alternating patterns of crimson red, stark white, and deep blue. I watched a firefighter, his face a mask of grim, practiced determination, use the hydraulic jaws of life to pry open the driver's side door with a deafening, metallic groan of protesting, tortured steel. I saw them pull my lifeless form from the wreckage, their movements both gentle and urgent, a practiced dance of emergency response. I should have been screaming in terror. I should have been consumed by a bottomless, raging grief for the life of potential that had been so abruptly and violently stolen from me. But I felt nothing of the sort. I was enveloped, embraced by a peace that defied all logic and human explanation, a tranquility so absolute, so profound, that it rendered the tragic, frantic scene below utterly meaningless, like a play being performed on a distant stage for a different audience. I followed the ambulance as it sped, siren wailing through the cold night, toward the hospital where my own father worked. I was a silent, unseen passenger on the most significant journey of my short life. I floated without effort or thought through the solid brick walls of the emergency room, an act that felt as natural and intuitive as breathing. I saw a team of doctors and nurses, my father's colleagues and friends among them, working with a practiced, desperate urgency over my earthly form. I heard them shouting out medical jargon, VFib, no pulse, asystole numbers and commands. I saw one of them, a man who had been to our house for Christmas parties and had praised my photography, look at the flat lines on the monitors, take off his sterile gloves with a sigh of defeat, and shake his head with a final, sorrowful resignation. I saw my parents burst through the automatic doors, their faces a portrait of raw, unadulterated parental terror. I saw my father, the brilliant surgeon who held life and death in his skilled hands every single day, a man of immense confidence and unshakable authority, look utterly and completely helpless. His face, usually so composed and analytical, was a mask of disbelief, denial, and raw, animalistic agony. I saw my mother, the impeccably dressed, always in control real estate agent, the woman who organized flawless charity events and never had a single hair out of place, let out a sound, a guttural, soul-tearing howl of pure, primal grief that seemed to suck all the air and hope out of the brightly lit room. Their pain was a physical force, a raging, violent storm of sorrow, regret, and loss. But I was in the calm, quiet, serene eye of that storm, untouched, undisturbed, and strangely, finally, irrevocably free. It was like watching a tragic film, and I felt a distant, intellectual pity for the characters, for the life and the people I had left behind. It was in that moment of serene, intellectual detachment that I became aware of a presence behind me. It wasn't a sound or a sight or even a touch. It was a feeling, a warmth. This was not the warmth of a fire or the gentle, distant heat of the sun. This was a living, breathing, personal warmth, an energy that felt like pure, concentrated, unconditional love. I turned my awareness, my consciousness, and my very soul was drawn toward its source. Before me, a tunnel had formed in the very fabric of reality. It was not a dark, foreboding passage into an unknown and terrifying abyss. It was a swirling, dynamic, breathtaking vortex of glowing, golden, liquid light, and it hummed with a gentle, welcoming, celestial music that my soul, not my ears, could hear and understand with perfect clarity. I felt an irresistible pull, not of force or coercion, but of an inexorable, magnetic belonging, as if the very essence of my being was a unique, intricately shaped puzzle piece, finally being drawn to the one empty space in the universe it was always and forever created to fill. For a fleeting moment, a lifetime of intellectual skepticism, the well-honed voice of my analytical debate team mind tried to assert itself. Is this real? Is this death? Is this merely a complex neurochemical hallucination created by a dying brain, a final, desperate, meaningless electrical storm of firing synapses as my consciousness fades to eternal black? But the questions which had once seemed so important, so clever, so foundational to my identity, now felt thin, brittle, and utterly meaningless when compared to the profound, overwhelming, and undeniable reality of the love that radiated from that light. The closer I moved toward the light, the more the carefully constructed, high-achieving identity of Eliana Vance simply fell away, layer by layer, like shedding a heavy, ill-fitting coat. The weight of my parents' immense and unspoken expectations, the gnawing, persistent anxiety about my future and my college applications, the secret, gnawing fear of never being smart enough, pretty enough, or successful enough, all of it dissolved like sugar in hot water. I was not a student, I was not a daughter, I was not a debater. I was not my GPA or my SAT scores or my college acceptance letters. I was just me. A consciousness, a soul, and I was free. I was surrounded by a peace that was deeper and more restorative than any sleep, more real and vibrant than any waking moment I had ever experienced on earth. I surrendered to the pull, I let go of my questions, my skepticism, my fear. I stepped through the light. The world I entered is, by its very nature, impossible to adequately describe with the clumsy, limited tool of human language. It is like trying to describe a symphony to someone who has never heard sound, or explaining the concept of color to someone born blind. I was standing in a place that held the essence of the high mountain meadows I loved to photograph, the places where I felt the closest to something true and authentic on earth. But this was the ultimate reality of which those earthly meadows were only a faint, faded, and imperfect photograph. The colors were more vivid, more alive, more real than anything my physical eyes had ever been capable of registering. The green of the grass was 1,000 shades of emerald, jade, and peridot, and each individual blade seemed to shimmer and vibrate with its own internal living light. The wildflowers that dotted the endless, rolling meadow bloomed in hues so vibrant, so complex, so beautiful that they simply do not exist in our limited visible spectrum. The air itself seemed to be made of music, a silent, joyful, complex symphony that vibrated in the very core of my being, a melody of pure, unadulterated creative life. The entire landscape was breathing, alive with a palpable life force that emanated from a single, central, and overwhelmingly powerful source. And then I saw him, Jesus. The somber, pale, two-dimensional figures from the Renaissance paintings I had so carefully studied in my art history textbook were laughable, pathetic, almost insulting attempts to capture an infinite, multidimensional living reality. He was not a static image to be analyzed. He was a dynamic, living, breathing reality. He was not defined by human features. He was not tall or short. His skin was not one color or another. His hair was not one length or another. He was beyond all such limited, tribal, earthly classifications. He simply was. His form was composed of a light so pure, so brilliant, so holy that it was not merely shining on him, it was radiating from him. He was the source of all the light, all the life, all the beauty, all the music, all the love that surrounded me. But more than the light, more than the incomprehensible power that I could feel holding the very fabric of this perfect place together, was the love. It was not an emotion he was feeling, like happiness or sadness. It was the very substance of his being. It was a torrent, a waterfall of pure, unconditional, holy love that poured out of him in endless, overwhelming waves and washed over me, through me, cleansing every part of my soul. And that love saw me, it saw me. Not the carefully curated, high-achieving, polite version I presented to the world, but the real, unedited, unabridged me. It saw every cynical thought I had ever harbored. It saw every time I had feigned belief to please my parents or my teachers. It saw every sharp, cutting, judgmental word I had spoken in the heat of a debate simply to win a point. It saw every secret compromise of my integrity, every hidden, gnawing fear, every single ounce of my towering, self-satisfied intellectual pride. It saw the entirety of my flawed, broken, arrogant, 17-year-old soul, and it loved me. It loved me with an intensity, a purity, a fierceness that was both terrifying in its absolute holiness and exhilarating in its boundless grace. In the face of that perfect, all-knowing, all-seeing love, my lifetime of skepticism, my carefully constructed intellectual defenses, my pride in my own intelligence and my analytical abilities, they all crumbled into a billion pieces of worthless, insignificant dust. I fell to my knees, not forced down by a superior power, but compelled by an overwhelming, irresistible sense of awe, of release, of surrender. I had expected to feel shame. I had braced myself, even in this place, for the crushing weight of my unbelief, my sin, my intellectual arrogance, my profound inadequacy. Instead, for the very first time in my entire existence, I felt completely and utterly whole, as if a missing, essential, God-shaped piece of my soul had finally, miraculously, and perfectly been put into its proper place. He said my name, Eliana, and the sound of it on his lips was like the roar of a great and distant ocean and the most intimate, personal whisper at the same time. It was the sound of my true name, the name my soul had been created to respond to, a name spoken with perfect love. "I have been waiting for you," he said. I tried to form a response, to articulate the cataclysmic, paradigm-shattering explosion of thought and emotion happening within me, but I couldn't. I just wept, not the quiet, controlled tears of a teenage girl who is afraid of looking weak or messing up her makeup. This was a raw, guttural, cleansing sob, a deep, soul-deep flood from a heart that had been pretending to be strong, pretending to be self-sufficient, pretending to be fine for far too long. I wasn't embarrassed. I was, for the very first time, truly and completely myself, and I was home. "Am I dead?" I finally managed to ask, my voice a broken, watery whisper against the beautiful, living silence of that perfect place. He smiled, and in that smile was all the joy of creation, all the light of a billion newborn stars, all the love of a father for his long-lost child. "Your body on earth is dying, yes," he said, his voice a gentle, loving reassurance that calmed the last of my trembling soul. "But you, Eliana, are more alive right now than you have ever been." I slowly, shakily got to my feet, still trembling from the sheer, overwhelming, reality-altering force of the love I was experiencing. I looked around at the impossible, vibrant landscape, at the sky of colors for which there are no words on earth. Where am I?" I whispered in awe. He looked off into the distance, and in less than the blink of an eye, the radiant meadow was gone. We were standing in a new place, a new reality, high above the earth, as if suspended in the black, velvety, star-dusted fabric of space itself. Below us, the North American continent was spread out like a living, breathing, and troubled map. The cities glowed like clusters of fallen, feverish stars, the highways were like silver threads woven into the dark fabric of the land, and the great rivers were like the veins of a sleeping, dreaming, and wounded giant. And then he said, his tone shifting from one of joyful, personal welcome to one of somber, cosmic gravity, "There is something I need to show you. A truth about the nation you came from, and about the deep and grievous state of my own people, my church." 002400, a call for engagement. That is where my true journey, my real and terrifying education, truly began. But before I tell you what I saw, before I relay the urgent, heartbreaking, and controversial message that Jesus Christ himself gave to me, a message about Donald Trump, a message about the profound sickness of political idolatry that has infected the American church, and a message about the unseen spiritual war that is raging for the very soul of the nation, I need to ask you to do something. Please listen to this testimony with more than just your ears. Listen with your spirit. I am not a pastor, I am not a theologian. By my own admission, just hours ago in earthly time, I was a proud, intellectual skeptic. But what I witnessed in that place between life and death did not just change my mind. It unraveled and rewove the very fabric of my soul. And I know, with a certainty that burns within me like a holy and unquenchable fire, that I was sent back to this world to share it, so that it might change you too. So, if you are listening to this right now, I implore you to subscribe to this channel. Do not miss the rest of this urgent testimony, as there is more to come. Please leave a comment below if you, too, have ever felt that our world and even our churches are being torn apart by a division that seems to go deeper and feel darker than mere politics. And most importantly, stay with me on this journey. Because what Jesus showed me will not only shock you, it just might be the very thing that saves your soul. We remained suspended in that space high above the earth. My perception of the world below continued to shift and deepen. It was no longer just a visual experience, it was a spiritual one. I could feel the planet beneath me. I could feel the collective hum of human existence, the striving, the loving, the creating. But it was overlaid with a jarring, dissonant, painful frequency. It was the frequency of anxiety, of ceaseless noise, of a heavy blanket of confusion, and a raw, untethered, and increasingly volatile anger that lay over the land. It was a spiritual dissonance, a low-frequency hum of sorrow, bitterness, and strife that emanated from the very soul of the nation. Jesus stood beside me, and his presence was a perfect, immovable island of absolute peace in the midst of this roiling spiritual chaos. His silence was not empty. It was patient, profound, allowing me the time to truly see with my new eyes, to feel with my new soul. "Is this heaven?" I finally asked again, my voice feeling small and utterly insignificant against the vastness of the cosmos and the overwhelming turmoil emanating from the world below. He looked at me, and his eyes were a universe of conflicting, yet perfectly harmonized emotions. I saw the profound, unshakable joy of his own divine, holy being, but it was mingled with a deep, penetrating, heartbreaking sorrow for the world he had created, the world he so deeply loved. "No, Eliana," he said, his voice a soft, gentle thunder that seemed to vibrate within me. "Not yet. You are in the space between, a place of seeing, a place of truth." I turned my gaze back to the earth. From this divine vantage point, it was so exquisitely beautiful, a fragile, swirling jewel of blue and white and green, suspended in the velvet blackness of space. Yet now I could feel its deep brokenness, its spiritual pain, as if it were my own. "I tried to be a good person," I found myself saying again, a faint echo of my old debate team defensiveness, my ingrained need to justify my own existence creeping into my voice. "I received academic honors. I volunteered at the local food bank for my school's community service requirement. I didn't break any major laws." Jesus didn't answer directly. His way was not to engage in arguments or rebuttals. His way was to reveal truth. He raised a hand that radiated a soft, pure light, a light that seemed to be the source of all the stars around us, and he pointed down toward the continent of North America. "Watch," he commanded, his voice both gentle and absolute. In an instant, my perspective zoomed in, moving with an impossible, silent speed, passing through the atmosphere, through clouds, through the solid roof of a hospital, until we were hovering, unseen and unheard, inside an intensive care unit, my ICU room. I saw my own still body again, a pale and lifeless shell, a mannequin entangled in a seemingly infinite and complex web of wires and clear plastic tubes that connected it to a bank of blinking, pulsing, beeping machines. I saw my mother, sitting ramrod straight and impossibly still in a hard plastic chair beside the bed. She was clutching my limp, lifeless hand in both of hers, her face a stoic, brave mask that couldn't quite hide the slight, continuous trembling of her lips or the utter deadness in her eyes. My father, the brilliant surgeon who was always in command, always the one with the answers, stood by the window with his back to the room, his powerful shoulders shaking with silent, uncontrollable sobs. He was a man completely and utterly broken by his own powerlessness in the face of death. A nurse, her face etched with a practiced but genuine sympathy, was speaking in hushed, somber tones to a doctor in the hallway. I couldn't hear their earthly words, but I felt their meaning resonate in the sterile, antiseptic air like a funeral bell. "There's no brain activity. We've done everything we can. It's over. It's just the machines now." And as if on cue, a monitor beside my bed, the one tracking my heart's electrical activity, let out a single, long, piercing, flat tone that seemed to signal the final, irrevocable end of all earthly things. Jesus turned his gaze from the heartbreaking scene to me. His eyes were full of a gentle, solemn, and eternal gravity. "This is the moment, Eliana," he said, his voice cutting through my serene, detached peace. "This is the moment when a soul stands on the precipice of eternity. This is the moment when everything they have built their life upon, their achievements, their intellect, their relationships, their earthly beliefs, is weighed in the divine balance." "Am I going to stay dead?" I asked, the question feeling strangely detached, clinical, and absurd. "That depends," he replied softly, his gaze holding mine, seeming to look into the very core of my being. "You have a choice." I swallowed, a reflexive, ghostly action of a body I no longer possessed. A choice. To stay here, he said, his gesture encompassing the infinite, peaceful cosmos that surrounded us, in the joy and the rest of my presence. Then he added, and the weight of his words, the weight of the commission they contained, settled upon my soul like a physical mantle, or to return with the heavy, heartbreaking burden of the truth that I am about to show you. I did not answer, I could not. The peace of this place, this holy space, was so alluring, so complete, so utterly satisfying to the deepest longings of my soul. The thought of returning to that world of pain, of striving, of confusion, of grief, of brokenness, was almost unbearable. I wasn't afraid, not in the earthly sense of the word, but a new kind of weight was settling in my spirit, a feeling of immense, daunting, and terrifying responsibility. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. It was not a physical touch, but I felt it more profoundly, more deeply than any earthly contact. It was a transference of strength, of calm, of a holy, resolute purpose. Our journey is not over, he said, his voice both firm and gentle. There is more you must see. And with those words, the sterile, grief-filled hospital room dissolved around us. We were somewhere else entirely. I found myself standing in a vast, wide-open field, but it was unlike any landscape I had ever photographed or even dreamed of. The grass beneath my spiritual feet glowed with a soft, internal luminescence, as if each individual blade was a tiny filament of living light. The air itself shimmered with a palpable warmth and a vibrant energy. There was no sun in the sky, no single discernible light source, yet everything was perfectly and gently illuminated with a light that seemed to emanate from the very ground, the very air, from every living thing. The sky above was an impossible, living, breathing tapestry of colors for which I had no names and my camera had no sensors. Soft, ethereal blues, radiant, royal purples, and shimmering, liquid streaks of pure, molten gold. There were no shadows here, no harsh edges, no sense of decay or imperfection, only a seamless, breathtaking, overwhelming beauty. And there was silence, but it was not an empty, awkward, or dead silence. It was a rich, sacred silence, a silence that was pregnant with meaning, with peace, with the unspoken, joyous presence of God. In the distance, I could see figures moving with an unhurried, joyful, and graceful purpose. As they drew closer, I felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated recognition that shot through my soul like a bolt of holy lightning. My grandmother, who had passed away from a long and painful battle with cancer when I was 12, was there. Her face, which my last earthly memories held as pale, gaunt, and drawn with sickness, was now radiant, vibrant with a perfect, eternal health and a joy so pure it was dazzling to behold. My grandfather, who had died in a tragic car crash years before I was born but whose warm, crinkly-eyed smile I knew so well from old, faded photographs, was standing beside her, his arm wrapped lovingly around her. I saw a childhood friend who had drowned in a boating accident when we were just 9. They were all there. They didn't speak with audible words, but their souls smiled at me, smiles of pure, unconditional love and a joyful, heartfelt, and complete welcome. I thought my spiritual heart would burst with the sheer, uncontainable, explosive joy of it all. Jesus turned to me, his own smile reflecting the pure joy and perfect beauty of the place. "This is a taste, Eliana," he said, his voice filled with the deep pleasure of a host finally welcoming a long-awaited and beloved guest. Only a glimpse. "A glimpse of what?" I asked, my voice filled with a childlike, breathless awe. He gestured with a hand of pure light toward the radiant souls who were now approaching us, their faces alight with love. "Of what it means to be fully and completely in my presence," he said. "This is a glimpse of home." I wanted to stay there forever. Every fiber of my being, every particle of my consciousness yearned to run into that field, to embrace my grandmother, to laugh with my childhood friend, and to never, ever look back at the world of shadows I had left behind. The crushing weight I had carried my entire life, the gnawing anxiety about my grades and my future, the immense pressure from my parents to be perfect, the secret guilt from my own selfish choices and compromises, the deep, unspoken loneliness that had been my constant companion even in a crowded room, none of it could exist in this place. It had evaporated like fog in the brilliant, loving light of a new and eternal morning. "This," Jesus said, his voice resonating with the deep, satisfying, and profound joy of a creator looking upon his beloved and redeemed creation, is what I made you for. I looked down at my hands, my spiritual hands, half expecting them to be glowing, transformed, radiant, like everything else around me. But they looked normal. They were still, in my perception, the hands of a 17-year-old girl. I don't belong here, I whispered, the old, familiar feeling of inadequacy, the lie that had been the bedrock of my earthly existence, a faint, dying echo in my soul. You were always meant to belong, he said with an infinite and healing tenderness. And then, just like that, with a gentleness that was heartbreaking, the scene began to fade. Not abruptly, not like a switch being flipped off, but like a beautiful, vivid, wonderful dream that you desperately fight to hold on to as the insistent tendrils of consciousness pull you back to the cold, gray reality of the waking world. The impossible, living colors began to melt away. The divine, loving warmth started to cool. A wave of pure, unadulterated, soul-deep panic washed over me. Wait, please don't take me away. I want to stay here, please. Jesus placed his hand over the place where my heart would be, and his resolute, unshakable peace washed over me, instantly quieting my frantic fear. I am not taking you away from this, Eliana, he said, his voice both a comfort and a command. I am preparing you for it. But first, I need you to see something else. I need you to understand why so few find this path, why so many of my own people are lost. Before I could ask what he meant, I felt that irresistible spiritual pull again, a powerful, inexorable current grabbing my soul and drawing me away from that glorious, tantalizing glimpse of heaven. The brightness dimmed. A new, harsher, more familiar and deeply unsettling kind of vision opened before me. It was Earth again, but this time the spiritual static I had felt before was a full-blown, raging, deafening storm. I saw vast crowds of people, their faces contorted in masks of raw, visceral anger. I saw clenched fists raised in defiance and self-righteousness. I heard the cacophony of a million shouting voices, a disorienting blend of accusation and condemnation. I saw signs held aloft, some with crosses defiantly emblazoned on them, some with the name of Donald Trump, some with slogans of rage against him. The scene was chaotic, a churning, boiling cauldron of tension, division, and a strange, unholy spiritual fire. And then my focus was pulled, as if by a magnetic force, to the churches. But what I saw made no sense to my newfound understanding of the God of love. People were inside the sanctuaries, but they were not worshiping, they were fighting. They were yelling at each other across the pews, their faces flushed and red with a fury that was anything but holy. I saw some people crying, not in tears of repentance or conviction, but in tears of pure frustration and anger at those who disagreed with them. I saw others storming out of the sanctuary, slamming the heavy wooden doors behind them in a dramatic, self-aggrandizing display of righteous indignation. This wasn't about faith, this wasn't about Jesus, this was about politics. I turned to Jesus, my spirit reeling in a state of shock and profound confusion. What is this? Why are they like this? He looked down at the chaotic scene, and the sorrow in his eyes was so deep, so profound, it felt as if it could drown the entire world. This, Eliana, he said, his voice a heartbroken whisper that cut me to the very core of my being, is where my people, my own church, are losing their way. A chill, colder and more terrifying than any earthly winter, a chill of spiritual dread, ran through the very essence of my being. I didn't fully understand the specifics of what I was seeing, but I knew, with a certainty that defied all reason and logic, that something was terribly, fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. And I knew, with that same dreadful certainty, that this was only the beginning of the heartbreaking truth he had brought me here to see. I don't know how we moved. There was no sensation of travel, just an instantaneous shift in reality. The chaotic vision of the arguing churches vanished, the shouting ceased, the palpable tension dissolved. I found myself standing in a garden of impossible beauty, even more magnificent than the meadow I had seen before. There were trees whose leaves seemed to be woven from silver and gold, shimmering as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Flowers of every imaginable color glowed with a gentle, internal light, though there was no sun. A stream of water that looked like liquid crystal flowed nearby, and its sound was more beautiful than any symphony ever composed on earth. The very air felt soft and alive, as if love itself was the atmosphere I was breathing. I looked down and realized with a sense of wonder that my feet were not touching the impossibly green grass. I was standing but suspended, held up by the very fabric of the garden itself. And then he was there, Jesus, not as a disembodied voice or a feeling of warmth, but as a person. He was standing before me, more real, more solid, more present than anything I had ever known. I had seen countless artistic renderings of him, the solemn face on stained glass, the gentle shepherd in my mother's old children's Bible, the tortured figure on the crucifix. None of them, not a single one, had come remotely close to the reality of him. He wasn't just in the light, he was the source of all light. He didn't just feel loving, he was the very essence of love itself. He didn't have to speak, his mere presence was overwhelming. In that holy proximity, I felt every wall I had ever built around my heart crumble to dust. Everything I had ever carried rose to the surface, exposed by his pure light. Every cynical remark I had made, every time I had rolled my eyes at my parents' faith, every hidden thought of judgment or pride, he saw it all. There was no hiding, and yet the most astonishing thing happened. I wasn't afraid. Because in his eyes, which held the wisdom of all ages, I saw something that shattered my very soul: absolute, unconditional forgiveness. He knew me, the complete, unedited, unabridged version of me. The secret thoughts, the hidden shame, the intellectual arrogance, the anger I never dared to voice. He saw it all, and he did not turn away in disgust. Instead, he smiled. And that smile, a smile that held all the joy and grace in the universe, broke something deep inside me. I dropped to my knees and began to cry, not the quiet, controlled tears of a teenage girl who didn't want to mess up her makeup. This was a raw, guttural sob, a deep, cleansing flood from a heart that had been pretending to be fine for too long. He walked toward me, and the ground itself seemed to rejoice at his every step. He gently placed a hand on my head. "Eliana," he said, and my name in his voice was a healing balm. "I have always known you. I have always loved you." His voice was like wind and thunder, like 1,000 lullabies and the roar of the ocean all at once. It wasn't just sound, it was power, and yet it made me feel so safe, like I was being held by the one who made me. "Why me?" I asked through my heaving sobs. "I'm just a kid, I don't even know if I believed in you." He knelt beside me, the king of the universe, kneeling in a garden with a cynical, broken teenage girl. "I know," he said, his voice full of a gentle understanding, "but I always believed in you." I couldn't speak, the love I felt was too strong. It filled every empty place in me, every scar from my own making, every night I felt alone, every doubt I ever had. "I've brought you here for a reason," he said gently, "not to punish you, not to scare you, but to show you what you couldn't see before." "What's happening to the world?" I asked. "To your people?" He looked into the distance as if he could see through time itself. His eyes changed. They were still full of love, but now they carried something deeper, a holy sadness. "My people have forgotten me," he said. That sentence hit like thunder. "How?" I whispered. "They go to church, they sing about you." "They sing," he said, "but their hearts are far from me. Many of them shout louder about presidents than they pray to their Savior." I stayed quiet, I didn't know what to say. Jesus stood and reached out his hand. "There's more I need you to see," he said, "more I need you to understand." When I took his hand, we were lifted again, this time even higher. The earth below us faded into a map of shadows and light. Some places glowed with warmth, others were covered in a thick, churning fog. "What do you see?" he asked. "I see America," I said slowly, "but it looks fractured, dark in some places." He nodded. "There is a war happening that most cannot see," he said. "A war not of flesh and blood, but of spirits, of loyalty, of hearts." As he spoke, I felt something like a fire stir inside of me, not fear, but urgency. "You're going to show me more, aren't you?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but you need to remember something." He turned to me, his eyes shining like molten gold. Nothing I show you will make sense unless you understand this truth first. I am not a politician. I am not a president. I am the King of Kings. I did not come to win elections. I came to save souls. Those words echoed through me like waves crashing on a shore. He reached out and placed his hand on my chest. You were made for truth, Eliana. You were made for love, and my people were made to reflect me, not their politics. I swallowed hard. Then why are so many fighting? I asked. Why are churches so divided? Jesus paused before answering, because they have taken their eyes off me. That silence returned, the sacred silence. I could feel its weight. And then I knew the next part was going to be harder, more painful. Jesus looked at me once more. I need you to see what happens when my people choose sides instead of choosing me. Everything around us began to shift. The light dimmed, and I braced myself for what was coming. As the light around us dimmed, I could feel something change inside me. The peace of heaven still lingered, a foundation beneath me, but it was now mixed with a sense of grief, like I was about to witness something that would break my heart. Jesus stood beside me. He hadn't moved, but the atmosphere around him shifted. His expression grew heavier, more solemn. He pointed forward, and instantly a new vision opened before me. We were looking down at America again, but this time it wasn't still or quiet. It was moving fast, chaotic, angry. I saw cities full of people marching in the streets. I heard shouting, not from just one side, but from every direction. The noise filled my ears. It wasn't just sound, it was spirit. A spirit of division, of rage, of confusion. And then I saw the churches. What I saw didn't make sense at first. These were the places I had grown up thinking were safe, holy, places full of peace and worship. But what I witnessed was the opposite. In one church, I saw people arguing, red-faced, screaming across the pews. Some had signs with the names of politicians on them. Others shouted accusations at their own brothers and sisters in Christ. No one was praying, no one was listening. The cross at the front of the sanctuary had been pushed to the side to make room for a flag and a giant screen displaying election results. In another church, I saw people sitting in silence, bitter and closed off. They weren't worshiping. They were judging, whispering about those who voted differently, refusing to shake hands with those who disagreed. Their eyes were not lifted to heaven, but fixed on their phones, watching news clips, scrolling through political rants. I turned to Jesus. Why are they doing this? His voice was low and steady. They have traded the gospel for opinions, he said. They have given their hearts to causes instead of to me. But aren't they trying to do what's right? I asked. Some of them think they're defending truth. He looked at me, and I'll never forget what he said. Eliana, truth without love is not my truth. Justice without mercy is not my justice. And loyalty to man over me is idolatry. I felt those words in my bones. Jesus walked forward, and as he did, the vision expanded. Now I saw families, parents yelling at their children, siblings refusing to speak. Friends deleting each other from their lives, all because they couldn't agree on politics. I never told my people to choose sides in earthly battles, Jesus said. I told them to choose me. I watched as two neighbors, both believers, stopped talking because one had a yard sign for a Democrat and the other for a Republican. They had prayed together before, helped each other when someone was sick, but now they acted like enemies. This isn't what you want, is it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, he said, shaking his head. My heart breaks when my body is torn apart. Then I saw something even more heartbreaking. A group of teenagers, kids my age, sitting in the back of a church. They weren't listening, they were whispering to each other, checking their phones. Some were laughing, but others just looked empty. One girl scrolled past a Bible verse on Instagram and rolled her eyes. Another guy leaned over and whispered, I don't want to be like them, all they talk about is politics. The return and conclusion. Jesus looked at me again. When my people lift up presidents louder than they lift up my name, the next generation turns away. When they use my name to justify hatred, they teach the world that I am a God of division instead of love. I felt a tear slip down my face. Jesus reached out and touched my shoulder. You see now, don't you? He asked gently. Yes, I whispered. They've forgotten who the real enemy is. He nodded. The enemy wants them distracted. If he can get my people to fight each other, he doesn't have to fight them himself. Then Jesus showed me something else. It was quick, but it shook me. A pastor standing behind a pulpit, preaching not from the Bible, but from a political article. He quoted lighters and statistics, but never once said my name. In the back of the church, a visitor stood up and quietly left. She had come looking for hope. She left feeling judged. What happened to preaching the gospel? I asked. They've replaced it with platforms, Jesus said. They've forgotten that my kingdom is not of this world. I looked down at the vision below. People yelling, dividing, choosing parties over people, hatred in the name of righteousness. Then Jesus leaned close and spoke softly. Eliana, the time is short, the harvest is ready, but the workers are distracted. I felt a weight settle on my chest, a holy burden like something had been placed inside me, something I didn't ask for but knew I had to carry. What do you want me to do? I asked. You'll see, he replied, but first you need to understand who they've made into an idol. I didn't know what he meant, but even as the words left his mouth, the scene around us began to change again. The noise grew louder and a name echoed across the vision below. Trump. The name echoed again, louder this time. Trump. It rippled like thunder through the vision Jesus was showing me. It wasn't just a name being spoken. It was a name being lifted, exalted, argued over, fought for, and fought against. I looked down and saw people, millions of them, talking about him, in churches, in homes, at family dinners, in Christian schools, in prayer meetings. Some praised him as though he had been sent from heaven. Others despised him as though he had come from hell. Jesus watched silently as I turned back to him. Why are they so divided over one man? I asked. His eyes grew deeply serious. Because they've stopped looking at me, he said. Suddenly, we were standing in front of a large church building. I saw the inside, hundreds of people worshiping, but something was off. At the front of the sanctuary, next to the cross, was a framed picture of Donald Trump. A spotlight shone on it. People were clapping and cheering, shouting phrases like, "He's God's anointed," and "Only he can save this country." My stomach turned. Jesus whispered, "This breaks my heart." I watched as the camera of the vision zoomed in on faces, men and women with hands lifted, not in worship to Jesus, but in political passion. Preachers stood on stage shouting about elections and moral battles, but never once mentioned the gospel. People nodded in agreement, some with tears in their eyes, others clenching their fists in anger at the other side. Then Jesus pointed his hand, and the vision shifted. Now we were in a different church, one just as big, but here the atmosphere was icy cold. The people weren't cheering, they were boiling with rage. Some were praying, yes, but not for mercy. They were praying for destruction. "Lord, strike him down," one woman said aloud. "Let judgment fall on that evil man," another prayed, shaking. A man read a psalm out loud, replacing the enemies of Israel with Trump's name. Again, I turned to Jesus. They hate him just as much as the others worship him. He nodded, and both sides are deceived. I didn't expect that. You mean the ones who love him and the ones who hate him? I asked. Yes, Jesus said, because neither side is looking at him through my eyes. Before I could ask what he meant, he reached out his hand. A vision appeared between us, this time not of earth but of a single man, Donald Trump. But it wasn't like seeing him on the news or on a stage. I was seeing his heart. I gasped inside. I saw pain, deep pain, a child once full of ambition and hope, now burdened by years of pressure, criticism, and pride. I saw loneliness, I saw wounds from people he trusted, I saw anger and confusion. I saw a man who wanted to do right but didn't always know how. He is not the monster some believe him to be, Jesus said. But he is not the Messiah others claim he is, either. He is simply a man, wounded, imperfect, broken like every other man I've come to redeem. I watched as Trump tried to navigate through darkness. Some around him whispered lies into his ears. Others told him what he wanted to hear just to gain power. And others tried to destroy him, feeding their hatred every time he spoke. "The enemy is using this," Jesus said, "to divide my church." Then he looked at me directly. "They are placing their hope in a man, they are worshiping a political outcome. They are calling themselves mine, but they have forgotten the one who truly saves." I lowered my eyes, shame burned inside me, not because I had worshipped Trump, but because I had silently watched people I knew do it and said nothing. "What should we do?" I asked quietly. "Pray," Jesus said, "but not prayers of obsession or hatred. Pray that his heart would be softened, pray that truth would reach him, pray that my love would break through the noise." I watched as demons, yes, demons, hovered around churches, not trying to shut them down but to stir them up, whispering lies, stoking fires of division, turning conversations about grace into debates about candidates. Every time a Christian yelled in hatred over politics, the demons laughed. "They win," Jesus said, "every time my people choose sides instead of choosing me." I couldn't take it anymore. "I don't want to go back," I said. "How can I live in a world like that? Everything is so broken." Jesus placed his hands on my shoulders and looked into my eyes. "That is why I need you to return," he said. "Because my people are forgetting who I am, and I need them to be reminded." Tears spilled from my eyes, but I'm just a kid who's going to listen to me. Jesus smiled, the kind of smile that held galaxies inside it. "I've been using children to carry my messages for thousands of years," he said. "Don't worry about being young, worry about being faithful." Then the vision shifted one last time. I saw Donald Trump again, but this time he was old, sitting alone in a quiet room without cameras or crowds. He looked tired, worn, and sad. "He's searching for something real," Jesus said, "and he needs my love just like everyone else." He turned to me again. "But how will he find it?" Jesus asked. "If my people are too busy worshiping him or hatting him to show him who I really am." I couldn't answer, I just stood there trembling. Then Jesus said something I will never forget. "The horrifying part of this message isn't about Trump, it's about how far my people have drifted." I nodded slowly, I understood now. And then he asked me, "Will you tell them?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, but what if they don't believe me?" "Some will, some won't," he said. "That's not your job is to tell the truth." If this message has moved you in any way, I invite you to pause. Please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the rest of what Jesus revealed. Leave a comment, what are your thoughts on what I saw? And share this with someone who needs to hear that our hope is not in a man, but in Jesus Christ alone. After Jesus asked me to tell his people the truth, I thought the vision might end. I thought maybe I had seen the worst of it. But he looked at me, serious and steady, and said, "There's something else you need to see." And then the light around us vanished. In an instant, I was pulled into a place I didn't recognize. It wasn't like heaven, it wasn't even like earth. It was darker, thicker, heavier. There was a weight in the air that pressed against my skin. The atmosphere was colder, though not freezing. It was more like the absence of warmth, of love. I stood beside Jesus on what looked like the edge of a battlefield. But there were no tanks or missiles, just spirits, thousands of them. I saw creatures I couldn't fully describe, twisted, dark, shapeless, and shifting. Some had wings like shadows, others slithered like smoke across the ground. And they were laughing, that's what struck me first. They were laughing not with joy but with cruelty. They hovered over churches, homes, and even screens, phones, computers, TV broadcasts, whispering into the ears of people who thought they were doing good. They weren't trying to possess anyone, they didn't need to. All they had to do was whisper, and the people listened. I watched one dark figure lean over a church leader and whisper, "They're the enemy, you must speak out, if you don't, you're weak." The pastor's face twisted, not in peace, not in conviction, but in pride. He walked up to his pulpit and began preaching, not the gospel but anger, rage disguised as righteousness. Another demon flew over a young woman scrolling social media. They're evil, they hate you, you owe them nothing, it hissed. She read a comment under a post and immediately typed a reply filled with hate, mockery, and venom, and the demon smiled. Jesus stood quietly beside me, watching. This is the real war, he said. Not between parties, not between people, but between light and darkness, and too many of my people have forgotten. I could hardly breathe. The demons weren't afraid of Christians. Not because Christians were weak, but because they were distracted, divided, so busy yelling at each other that they didn't even realize they were being played. I watched one of the spirits hover over a group of believers in a Bible study. She voted differently, it whispered, pointing to a woman in the corner. You can't trust her. The others looked at her with suspicion. They smiled, but it wasn't real. The love was gone, and again the demons laughed. It broke me. I turned to Jesus, tears burning in my eyes. Why don't they see it? I asked. Why don't they recognize what's happening? Because they're listening to the wrong voices, he said. Then he pointed upward and I saw angels. Hundreds of them, glowing, radiant, powerful, but many of them stood still. Not because they were lazy, but because no one was praying, no one was asking. They were ready to move, to fight, to help, but the believers had stopped calling on heaven. They've put their faith in men, Jesus said, and when people place their trust in human power, they stop seeking divine help. I saw more scenes. A small church split down the middle because one elder supported a different candidate than the pastor. Families refused to speak over Thanksgiving dinner because of political arguments. A married couple sleeping in separate rooms because of who they voted for, and the demons celebrated. This isn't just disagreement, Jesus said, it's division, and division is one of the enemy's oldest weapons. I remembered reading somewhere that Satan's name means accuser. In that moment, I understood it fully. He doesn't just accuse us before God, he teaches us to accuse each other. And when we do, we become blind to the fact that we're doing his work for him. I thought demons only showed up in horror movies, I said quietly. Jesus looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and truth. The most dangerous demons don't appear in horror, he said. They appear in pride, in self-righteousness, in the need to be right at any cost. The battlefield stretched on, but then Jesus raised his hand and something changed. I saw a woman fall to her knees in her living room, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, Lord, forgive me. I've hated people who think differently than me. Immediately, one of the dark spirits around her vanished like smoke blown away by the wind. Then a young man knelt beside his bed and said, Jesus, help me love people again, even the ones I don't understand. And another demon vanished. I turned to Jesus. So this is how we fight back. Yes, he said, with repentance, with humility, with love. Not clever words, not louder arguments, not stronger politics, just love, real, costly, Christ-shaped love. That's when it hit me. The demons didn't fear elections, they feared repentance, they feared unity. Because when the church is united in Jesus, no kingdom of darkness can stand against it. I looked at Jesus and said the words I had been holding back. I'll go back, I'll tell them, I don't care if they believe me, I can't stay quiet after seeing this. He placed his hand over my heart, that's all I ask. After the battlefield faded, I stood in silence beside Jesus. My heart felt heavy, like it had absorbed the sorrow of every soul I had just seen. I didn't want to ask what came next. I didn't think I could take another vision of division or hatred. But Jesus gently lifted my chin, looked into my eyes, and said, You've seen what is. Now I want to show you what could be. His voice wasn't just kind, it was powerful, like a song pulling me forward. Before I could respond, the darkness around us began to lift, and suddenly I found myself standing in the same country, but something was different. It was brighter, cleaner, lighter. The sky had a glow that reminded me of the light I first saw when I left my body. The air felt alive with warmth. I looked down and saw people, thousands of them walking, talking, laughing, praying. But the most incredible thing, they were together. Black, white, rich, poor, young, old. There were no signs, no protests, no arguments, just unity, real unity. Not because they all agreed on every issue, but because they had agreed on something greater, Jesus. I watched a church that had once been full of division now open its doors to anyone. Not just people who believed like them, but people who were hurting. A homeless man was led to the front pew. A woman struggling with addiction wept as a small group gathered around her, laying hands and praying. No one asked who they voted for, no one cared, what mattered was love. Jesus spoke beside me. This is what happens when my people stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. Then the vision widened. I saw neighborhoods once riddled with crime now filled with worship. Not because laws changed, but because hearts changed. I saw teenagers raising their hands to heaven at youth meetings in high school gyms. I saw dads once too proud to pray, kneeling beside their kids at bedtime. I saw moms speaking blessings over their families instead of worrying about the future. Hospitals began filling with prayer, not just medicine. Not everyone was healed instantly, but hope had returned and peace. Even in politics, something had shifted. Leaders still disagreed, but they listened. They spoke respectfully. Churches stopped endorsing parties and started interceding for souls. Christians began meeting across the aisle to pray instead of protest. And most powerful of all, I saw Donald Trump again, but not on a stage, not behind a microphone. He was older, weary, and kneeling, alone in a room, no cameras, no applause, just him and God. And I saw tears on his face. Jesus whispered, "He found me, not because people forced him to, but because someone finally showed him my heart." I stood there stunned. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't a dream. It was a picture of what could be if believers would stop lifting up personalities and start lifting up the name above all names. "I want this," I said. "I want this for my family, my town, my school." Jesus nodded. "Then you must speak, you must show them." I looked down again and saw something I'll never forget. A group of people gathered in a small kitchen, passing out food to neighbors who'd lost their jobs. A woman with a Trump bumper sticker was hugging a man who'd once cursed his name. They didn't argue, they didn't label each other, they simply loved. Another group was baptizing new believers in a muddy river. Some had tattoos, some wore business suits. No one asked their background. They celebrated like heaven was near because it was. "Is this really possible?" I asked. Jesus looked at me. "It starts one heart at a time." Then I saw the youth of America, kids my age, even younger, praying in circles at schools, in backyards, even on basketball courts. Not because of rules or pressure, but because something had awakened in them, a hunger for truth, a fire. "This generation," Jesus said, "has been overlooked, mocked, labeled, but I will use them to bring revival." Tears filled my eyes again, this time not from sorrow, but from hope. I remembered the demons I had seen, I remembered their laughter, and now I saw what made them flee, not fear, but love, real love. Jesus turned to me again and said, "Eliana, the world is watching my church, and right now they see noise. But if my people return to me, if they put me first, the world will see my face." I nodded, barely able to speak. "I'll tell them," I whispered. "I'll tell them everything." He looked pleased, but I could tell it wasn't over yet. "There's one more thing you must see," he said, "to understand why this matters." The light around us began to fade again. A deep, unfamiliar coldness moved in. I turned to him, hesitant. "Where are we going now?" His answer was quiet. "To the place where my absence is complete." And in that moment, I knew he was taking me to the edge of hell. The warmth of the vision began to fade, colors dulled, the brightness that had filled the skies grew dim. I looked around, and the beauty of what I had just seen, revival, unity, healing, vanished like breath on a mirror. I turned to Jesus. His face hadn't changed. He was still full of love. But something in his expression told me what was coming would be difficult, not for him but for me, and then the light disappeared. We descended into a place unlike anything I had seen or imagined. At first there was only darkness, thick, suffocating. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was the presence of something else. A weight, a coldness that went straight through the soul. The air was heavy, the silence was deafening. And then I heard it, screams, not screams like someone being startled. These were cries of pure anguish, regret, torment, the kind of sound that grabs your chest and doesn't let go. I looked around and saw shadows moving, people, or at least what used to be people, souls twisted and trembling. Some reached out, clawing at the empty air, others curled up in corners, sobbing with no tears. It wasn't fire that made hell terrifying, it was separation, separation from everything good. Every bit of joy, every drop of peace, every ounce of hope gone forever. And worse than the darkness was the awareness that they had chosen this. They had heard the truth, they had known love, some had even sat in church pews. But they clung to their pride, their hate, their self-righteousness, and rejected the only one who could save them. I looked to Jesus, trembling. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. He didn't answer with words, he showed me. I saw a man sitting in a pew with a Bible in his lap. He looked holy on the outside, well-dressed, well-spoken. People looked up to him, but inside he was cold. He used the name of Jesus to win arguments, not to serve people. He had led others to follow a political figure more than Christ. And now he was among the shadows. I cried out, but he went to church. Jesus spoke quietly. He knew of me, but he never truly knew me. He replaced me with power. Then I saw a woman who had spent years mocking Christians online. She had been hurt by religion, betrayed by people who said they followed Jesus but lived like Pharisees. So she built walls of sarcasm and anger. She refused every invitation to grace because she thought it was fake. Now she was alone, and her soul mourned not just for punishment, but for the truth she had missed. "Even she," I whispered. Jesus nodded, and there were tears in his eyes. "I wanted her," he said. "I waited for her. I called her again and again." He looked at me with sorrow so deep it felt eternal. "I do not send people here," he said. "They walk away from me, and this is what remains when I am removed." I collapsed to my knees. I didn't want to see anymore. The pain, the regret, the lostness. Then he showed me one more soul, a man on his knees weeping in isolation. He had once shouted on a platform about saving America for God. He had rallied others to follow a politician instead of preaching the gospel. He had cursed his enemies, justified his rage with scripture, gained influence but lost his heart. And now he whispered the words, "I didn't know you." Jesus wept. I never wanted this for any of them. Then he turned to me. "My people think hell is only for murderers, for monsters, but many here once called themselves mine. They used my name but not my love. They wore crosses but carried no mercy." His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with brokenheartedness. "Do you see now why this message must be told?" I nodded, my whole body shaking. "If we don't choose you, this is where we end up." He nodded, "Not because I want it," he said, "but because I gave them freedom, and some used their freedom to build thrones for men, others to build walls against grace, but few use it to kneel." He knelt beside me. "I don't want anyone to come here," he said. "That's why I came to earth, that's why I died, that's why I rose again, to make a way out." I looked at him, still kneeling, still holy, still burning with a love I couldn't describe. "What do you want me to say?" I asked. He looked into my soul. "Tell them I still love them, tell them it's not too late. Tell them that no politician can save them, no system can secure them, only I can." He stood, "Tell them hell is real, but so is mercy." And in that moment the darkness began to fade. The cries quieted, the shadows dissolved, and I found myself once again in the presence of light. But I was no longer the same. After I saw hell, I was silent, not just from fear, but from awe. The pain, the regret, the emptiness, it was more real than anything I'd ever known, and Jesus, he wept not in anger but in grief. He turned to me with fire in his eyes and said, "Now, Eliana, I will give you the message I want you to carry." I stood before him trembling. "My people have been deceived," he said. "They've placed their hope in leaders, in parties, in promises made by men. But I never asked them to follow men, I asked them to follow me." I watched as images floated around us, Christians in church shouting more about politics than the gospel. Families divided over who they voted for, people refusing to pray for others because of political disagreement. They've forgotten their first love, Jesus said, and the world is watching. I asked, "What do you want me to say?" He replied, "Tell them their identity is not Republican or Democrat, not conservative or progressive. Their identity is in me. They are children of God if they will return." Then he said something that broke me. Many who speak in my name do not know me. They defend me online but ignore me in private. They wear crosses but won't carry them. They call me Lord but don't let me lead. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. Jesus looked directly at me. "Tell them I am coming soon, but I am not coming for a political army. I am coming for a faithful bride." Then he placed his hand over my heart. "Say it clearly, stop fighting each other, start loving each other, stop lifting up men, lift up me." Tears ran down my face. What if they laugh at me? "Some will," he said, "but some will listen, and they are the ones I'm sending you to." A silence fell, a holy silence. Then Jesus said, "Go, the time is short, the harvest is ready, but my church must wake up." And in that moment, I knew I was going back. I woke up gasping, cold air filled my lungs, lights blinded me. I heard machines beeping and voices shouting. My mom was crying over me, holding my hand like she never wanted to let go. "She's back," the nurse whispered. "She was gone, but she's back." They told me later I had been dead for 9 full minutes. No heartbeat, no brain activity. They said I shouldn't be alive, shouldn't be able to speak, but I could, and I remembered everything. At first, I didn't know how to tell them. How do you explain to people that Jesus took you to heaven, showed you hell, and gave you a message about the church, about Donald Trump, and about the condition of our souls? But I had promised him I would tell the truth, so I did. Some believed me, others didn't. Some pastors told me I was confused. Others told me to stay quiet, but I couldn't. Because I saw him, and I saw what happens when we forget him. Now I see it everywhere. Christians arguing, families divided, churches silent about grace and loud about politics. I can't unsee what Jesus showed me, and I won't stop sharing it. If you're watching this, I want you to hear me clearly. Jesus is coming back. Not for a political movement, not for a patriotic revival, but for people whose hearts belong to him. If your hope is in a president, let it go. If your heart is filled with hate, let it go. If your faith is political, not personal, come back. Jesus loves Donald Trump, he loves his enemies, and he loves you, but only he is the Savior. Please don't wait. If this message speaks to you, leave a comment, share this video, and subscribe so more people can hear what Jesus is saying in this hour. Our time is short, but his mercy is still here. Let's return to him while there's still time.